Hey Coleman, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such an honor to have you here on the deal, man. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
No, pleasure's all mine. Pleasure's all mine. So let's get into this really quickly. I have to ask you about this video because the video is
hmm
fire. The video is
hmm
fire, right?
Thank you, man.
Blasphemy. I mean, like, I mean, quite honestly, I got a whole lot of questions I got to ask you off camera about this video anyway. But first off, I want to ask you like what inspired you to do this? I mean, there's obvious things that you talk about that inspired you to do it, but there could have been many other platforms as you're familiar with. But what made you want to do it in the music video?
Well, it was 2019 when I first started the song, and I had just testified before Congress, and I was feeling the heat of a lot of people that didn't like my opinion in the room, online, and I was there was a kind of resentment of feeling like people were not taking my opinion in good faith or
Mm-hmm.
seriously and engaging with it. And there was a kind of frustration that I just felt I had to channel, and that was really the feeling that sparked the song. So I made that beat, and then the lyrics just kind of came.
This kind of flows. I know all about inspiration. You know, it's very interesting. They say artists usually, when they're going through something, makes the best music. Would you agree
Mhm.
that that had it not happened, you don't think you would have been able to pull off a record like this?
I think you often have to have strong emotions about something. Where those emotions come from is less important, but yeah, I mean, it has to be a strong emotion that is the genesis of a moving piece of artwork.
Hmm. Right, right. So you are. Let me get this straight. You are black and you're also white. You're mixed. Is that what you? I think I caught that line inside the song, right?
Yeah, that's more of a metaphorical line in the song. I mean,
Okay.
ethnically, I would one would probably call me half black, half ethnically Puerto Rican. My mom was Puerto Rican, my dad
Okay.
is black.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So
But
here's
you
some
know,
of the lyrics.
On my Puerto Rican side, I'm also racially mixed. So like my grandma is like white Puerto Rican. My other grandma was black Puerto Rican. So even that is like, I do think at the end of the day, almost every black person in America has some quote unquote white in them
For
genetically.
sure.
That's
For
true.
sure.
And a lot of white people don't know they have black in them. So it's kind of
Nah.
metaphorical.
No, it's true. I mean, even if you look at the African American population or how many people have Native American in them, also too. Everybody's like,
hmm
it's always been a thing for me. Anybody that's black by the definition of meaning that descendant of slavery in America. And I'm gonna say most of the people that came over, but even a lot of them even are not 100% African genes. You understand what I mean? It's not. So this whole, you know, extra super pro black everything, and you're talking about the color of your skin, but ethnically, a lot of people have a lot of other ethnic groups, mixed into the gene pool for sure,
Right.
for sure. So I want to ask you about this record. So you said a few things. I want to quote a couple of these lines that you had. So you said, "Look at my attitude after they called me a Tom and a Ray called me a coon. It's a 10."
hmm
You said something else. It's a 10, but I keep it clean. I mean, explain some of these bars to me. I'm saying, don't tell me who to offend. Losing a few of my friends. Yeah, I've been booted from public events, and it was over something I said. Like,
hmm
talk to me about some of these things. I'm just excited to hear about it. I had Officer Tatum earlier on the show, and we discussed a few of these things. But I'm really like interested to pick your brain on this.
Well, yeah. So the choice for me as a public figure, as a writer, has been to think for myself and to think what I actually think and risk being called names by people, being called an Uncle Tom, being called a coon sometimes.
Right.
And the choices between that and just shutting up, thinking what I'm supposed to think, not really thinking for myself, and basically people pleasing,
Right.
catering to the people that wield those kind of epithets as a way of policing the boundaries of thought. So I've always chosen the first route, and that's basically what that's about. It's like I'm not going to stop thinking for myself because someone is calling me a name. I mean, that I think unfortunately those kind of slurs do work on a lot of people that don't want to, that limit themselves in what they'll think, so as to never cross boundaries that will get them called names by other Black people.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's just not the way to be an autonomous, self-driven individual.
Right. Right. Of course, it's not. I mean, there's a few different things, you know. I've struggled with a lot of these things. I myself, I grew up in the hood. I was very, very familiar with what that relationship was like, specifically, you know, dealing with a few of the things you were talking about on this record and things that just been going on. Specifically, that relationship between the police and me being a black man, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying, in the hood, growing up. And I always tell people, like, I was way more worried about the other guys I was beefing with than I was with the police. You know, I just didn't grow up with a crazy fear. My fear of the police is I didn't want to go to jail. But I
Hmm.
didn't grow up ever thinking, like, you know what I'm saying, the police are gonna shoot me. I know some people could argue that we're living in different times, but I think we're just living, you know what I'm saying, with different people on the news, to be honest. I think, you know, it's been very, very hard to be able to have these tough conversations because there's so much noise. And you being a public, for being a person that's a writer, you understand the power of, you know, putting articles out and different things like that. How strong do you think that the influence has been from the media in terms of being able to sway people in the black community
Hmm.
on this
Well,
issue
I
in
think
particular?
that's a great question, and I think the media, the one of the primary powers the media has, probably the most important power, is not necessarily how they tell you something. It's what they show and what they don't show. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm talking about national news. I'm talking about CNN, MSNBC, Fox, the national news, which is now what everyone watches. It used to be people were more into local news, but more
Right.
and more it's become national. And what happens is every day in this country, like a billion different things happen. Crazy things happen in different towns and cities all across America. And the national news picks and chooses, two or three to report.
Mm-hmm.
And the primary power they have to shape our picture of what's going on in our country is to choose certain things and to not choose others. So,
Right.
for example, um, obviously, the killing of George Floyd was a huge story, as it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 years before that, Tony Timpa, who was a white man in Dallas that was killed in a very similar way to George Floyd, on camera, a knee on the back of his neck for 13 minutes, and the cops making jokes as they killed him, right? That just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a big news story. So
Right.
basically, what happens is you show all the examples of things happen to Black people. You show none of the examples of them happening to white people, and then people form the impression that, oh, this kind of thing only ever happens to Black people because of what they're
Right.
being shown and what they're not being shown. And that's the primary power to shape the narrative. And it's, I don't even think a lot of people in the news are doing that consciously, or they know what they're doing,
Right.
but
Right.
that has a real power to skew people's perceptions about what's true.
Right. That's a great answer. Great answer. You know what, I myself, you know, it's very hard for me because when I'm having these conversations, even with people that I grew up with or different things like that, like, the truth is that nobody ever really thought it out. You understand what I'm saying? Nobody ever really thought about it themselves. You know, I mean, I remember being a kid and there would be these group of 5% guys, you know what I'm saying? And I think
Hmm.
you know, obviously meant well. So they would take us out of the class and they will pump us basically with their ideologies of how important it was as a black man to know that you're God and whatever the case is. But it was like, you know, all these things happening to people, you know, whether it's from the media, whether it's from, you know, these type of groups, or whether it's from what's happening in entertainment in our culture, it's really programming a person to think and not to think about things, their actual life experiences. In other words, like, you know, I was put on the spot after the George Floyd thing, and somebody was just like, you know, what's it like being black growing up, you know, in your neighborhood? Like, did you experience racism? What was that like? How did that feel? And I'm gonna be, I have to be honest with people. Like, I didn't, but it had it not been framed to me that way. You understand what I mean? I would have just been like, yeah, it's hard out here. You know what I'm saying? People are racist and all that because that's what I've been fed. You understand what I mean? But when I think about myself, how many times did I actually experience those things? I grew up in Seattle. Seattle happens to be very, very liberal, very, very politically correct. There could be a lot of systemic things that are wrong, but to say that I actually was experiencing racism or the police did this and whatever, yeah, the times I got jacked up by the police, it's like, I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing. I looked like I wasn't doing something that I should have been doing. So, uh, I guess my question is to you, are you seeing the same thing, for yourself also to that? A lot of people's opinions, they don't even own those opinions. They're not really theirs. They really belong to what they've been taught from other people.
So what you're talking about has a name. It's been given a name by certain thinkers called the optimism gap, which
Hmm.
is you ask someone the same question in two different ways and they will give you two different answers. So if
Right.
you ask someone how much racism there is in the US, they will tell you a lot. There's a whole lot of racism. How much crime is there in the US? There's a lot, whatever it is. If you ask them how much racism is there in your neighborhood, how much crime is there in your specific on your block, the more
Hmm.
concrete you make it so that they're actually thinking about their day-to-day experience, the
Hmm.
more people will say, well, actually it's not as bad, it's not as bad.
Right. Right.
Um so like if you ask everyone, have people been making economic progress the past 50 years, you'll get a lot of people saying no, we're just as poor as we ever were. You ask people, are you doing better than your parents? Most people will say, well, actually, yeah, I am doing better than my parents. So the more
r-
concrete you make it, the more you get people
Right.
to actually think about their own lives rather than these big narratives about the country that are influenced by the media, the more optimistic people are about the future and about how much progress has been made.
Wow. That's crazy. It's funny because,
Mhm.
not to get in, I don't care if you're for or not. I have to make that disclaimer just because I know that the, whatever algorithms and whoever's watching or whatever, not saying pro, not saying against, but the vaccine was a major issue this past year, right? So I seen a video somebody sent me of someone going around on college campuses and they were asking all these girls, how do you feel about, my body, my choice? Everybody obviously agreed. They agreed that it's okay to, abort their child and whatever else because it's their body, their choice, right? So,
Mhm.
and asked several different girls, and finally they after they were done asking, certain amount of girls, she went back and asked all these same girls, how do you feel about a vaccine mandate? With you, oh no, I'm definitely for it. I'm definitely for it. I'm definitely for it, 100%. For it. And then the question is, well, what does that do with my body, my choice? And everybody's stumped. Oh, I didn't think about that. Almost didn't think about it. So it seems like even in the midst of all of this, sometimes, it's just like, I mean, I found that to be very, very hilarious, but I think it's just one of those things where, um, I think people need to spend a little bit more time alone, away from the rest of the
Mhm.
world. Like, and for me, that's how I'm able to formulate my opinions. I take time. I go spend like an hour every day just talking to God, trying to formulate what my life is and what I'm supposed to be doing and why I was put here. Do you have any practices or anything like that help you to stay focused on what your path? Because you could be indoctrinated also too on the right, also too, right? Whether a person's right or the left on the political spectrum, you can hold and own opinions that don't really belong to you, but as an individual. So my question is for you: how do you keep your opinions your own?
That's a really good question. Well, I try to always, I mean, meditation helps. I'm a big meditator,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess the way that helps is to make me a little bit better at not trusting my first reaction to everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if I read something and I feel in my body, I think it's bull.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always trust that. I think, okay, wait a minute. I'm being too reactive to this.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of thing that's going to lead me to just confirm what I already believe. So let me actually give this a chance. Let me really uh,
Right. That's
give this as
so
much
good.
of a chance as I can and see if there's anything to be gleaned here, because I know that. So I'm doing that a lot when I'm reading things that I don't like. I try to expose myself to things that I wouldn't normally expose myself to,
Hmm.
and I think that helps me not get too deep down any rabbit holes that are misleading or wrong. And I try to
Right.
also really detach my own. I try as much as I can to detach my ego and identity from what I believe, right? Because the moment I say it's a core part of my identity that I believe X, Y, and Z, that's the moment that I'm going to start believing things that aren't true because I'm trying to protect my identity.
Right. Right.
So I try to remain as flexible as possible, as open to new facts and new information and new paradigms, not wedded to any one particular ideology, because I think pretty much every ideology gets something right and something wrong.
Right.
And and I'm hardly perfect, but I try my best.
Right. 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 So let's get back to the music a little bit since we play in a similar arena there. So I want to know what drove you to start producing and to start writing songs.
Well, I've been obsessed with music since I was like 12 years old. It's my first
Wow.
passion, really.
Wow.
And it's like, why does anyone get into music? It's like, it's the most beautiful thing in the world, and it's
Right.
sort of self-explanatory at that level. But getting into hip hop, I didn't really get too deep into producing and writing bars and that kind of thing until I was 18.
Mm.
And it was partly around the time my mom was sick and eventually passed away, and I was really using hip hop to cope with that loss a lot.
Wow. How old
um
were you? How old were you when you lost your mother?
18.
18. Oh wow,
Mhm.
wow. I was 19 when I lost my mother. Wow,
Mm.
it's crazy.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah. But I
It's
think,
wow. It's
the
wow.
great, we were talking earlier about how powerful emotions are usually the genesis of art. And so that was a huge, formative, powerful experience for me. That was the genesis of my interest in like really writing full songs. And um, so I dealt with a lot of the emotions through that. And ever since then, I've been producing and rapping and trying to sing a little bit sometimes.
Right, right, right. Yeah, once you start one thing, it leads to another, so like music is obviously the most powerful thing. So usually there is always some type of influence that sparks that. Who would you say were your musical influences? And particularly in your type of position and holding the views that you do. And even me, I would say even becoming more of a religious person over the years, right? So my musical influences um versus the fact that I probably disagree with them and a political standpoint, but disagree with them as an individual, but like they're still dope. You know what I mean? So like
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
want to know if like you have to deal with that dichotomy also.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've always found I can listen to music by people that disagree with my politics
Right.
um a lot. Like I can actually listen to music by people who I think have really wrong and kind of hateful views. And
Mm.
if it's good
Wow.
music, it still touches me. The humanity of it can still touch me 100%.
Right.
I mean, as far as influences, I have so many, but as far as rappers go, to
Hmm.
narrow it down, I mean, I love Tyler the Creator, Earl Sweatshirt. I
Mm.
love Kanye, Eminem, MF Doom, Kendrick Lamar, Childish Gambino,
Right.
Chance the Rapper,
You like
um,
rappers. You like real rappers, is what you're saying.
J Electronica.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good place to start.
Right. Right. No, so you're into the guys who, I mean, I would say Kanye is both and both. You know, Kanye would throw bars also too, but he's just such a creative. But also Tyler the Creator, just very very creative, out there type of guys that would just do things
Mm,
that you would never think on a record.
right.
Here's my question right now. In terms of guys that are out that are positive, I don't know if you're very familiar with his work. One of the guys I think that operate in that space, and I think this is a problem that's happened with hip hop, and it's sort of some of the problem that we're having also in a lot of these social issues that have now become political. There's a guy by the name of NF. You familiar with NF?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so NF is from Detroit. I encourage you to look him up.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of content wise, he's clean, meaning that
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't curse. He's almost like a clone of Eminem, I would say in a little bit. His style is very similar. He's also, you know, young white kid from Detroit. But I think a guy like him he's super talented. I think he's talented than uh, you know, a good majority of these guys that are out right now. That's my honest opinion. And I feel like even me being able to ask you that and you not know who he is, although he has millions and millions of followers and Baruch Hashem, he's had platinum records. But I feel like a guy like him and the way that the industry is going, he'll never get recognition because of the color of his skin. Is that ironic?
Mm. It's interesting. Yeah. You know, like obviously Eminem was a huge deal as really like the first white rapper, where
hmm
every great black rapper after him, or many of them at least, were influenced by him and respected him on
Right,
equal terms with the greatest black rappers. So he
right,
really did. He broke the. It sounds crazy to say, but he kind of broke the color barrier
right,
for
right,
white rappers.
right,
And there have been others in the meantime that have really gotten a lot of respect in the
hmm
world, like Mac Miller.
hmm
Um,
right,
but yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I don't know, going forward, the more and more race conscious that we get in the culture, and the more and more anti-whiteness is sort of viewed as cool in the
right,
culture, will white rappers, I mean, like, if you're a young white rapper now, I think it's, in some ways it's easier to come up because you've had Eminem and those kind of people before you, but in some ways it's
right.
harder to come up because if you say one wrong thing, you make one misstep, people are more going to be waiting to jump on you now than I think they were 10 years ago.
Right, right, right. And it's one of those things also too where I think in this particular case is sometimes that you'll never get that credit for really being that good because you know, it's just been such a grab on like, you know, this is our culture, this is us, this is you know what I mean? So almost feels like a person will never even get a chance. It's been bothering me a little bit. I kind of want to know what you thought about it, you know.
Hmm.
So you were a guest on the Bill Maher show and you were there to debate the police brutality. And you even testified in front of you know, Congress and everything to voice your opinion on slavery and reparations. So take
Hmm.
me through that experience, really. I really want to know like what that was like. What's it like to be a guest on the Bill Maher show? Like, tell me what that was like.
Well, they put me up in a really, really nice hotel, like way too nice. They treat all their guests the same, and they have people on there that are like A-list celebrities.
uh-huh.
So they treat everyone like an A-list celebrity pretty much by default, which was really cool.
Wow.
Besides that, there's actually nothing to say because it was during the height of COVID restrictions in LA, and
Wow.
LA was extremely conservative in their not conservative politically, but like risk averse in their COVID policy. So I couldn't
Right.
hang out with Bill. We couldn't have a get together. We couldn't have a party. We couldn't talk. I couldn't talk to anyone. It was masked the whole time. So it's just like straight to business, straight to the show, straight back home. There's really nothing I can say about it. But I mean, it was an honor to be on that show. I really like Bill's show. I think he's one of the few voices on the left that really is not afraid to disagree with the trend,
Right.
and says exactly what he feels. And I think that's really important, and that's why he's so recognized. As far as Congress, that was kind of a circus. That was much more it was way more disorganized than I thought it was. And if you've seen the video of these testimonies, it
Hmm.
doesn't really capture the degree of chaos that was actually in the room. Like it felt like it could almost turn into a riot at any moment, and like no one would know what
Wow.
to do. Like there wasn't that much security. It was kind of disorganized. It was like
Mm.
like a
Right.
lot of government functions. It's kind of like half baked and like not that tightly organized. It's kind of a show.
Right. So do you feel like your voice was heard? That's my question.
Um,
Like, you can imagine with the circus is already one thing, but then it's almost some like sometimes like you feel like you're talking to, what's your thought? Are you going there trying to convince anybody? Are you only saying like, listen, if I make a few good points, as long as this is filmed, then I'm gonna capture people out there, but I'm not even thinking about trying to change anybody's mind up there.
yeah, I was trying to communicate as succinctly as possible what I actually believed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to persuade people.
Right.
Um, and it's such a hard format because they say they give you 5 minutes, and like an idiot, I actually took that seriously. So I like made sure I could say everything in 5 minutes. And if like 5 minutes, you can't even say enough that would go into one op-ed, like a
Right.
short op-ed that would take like 10 minutes to read. So it's very difficult to communicate anything subtle.
Right.
But everyone else on the panel went like 10, 15 minutes, and I was like, Jesus, I feel like an idiot. I could have taken my time a little bit more. Um, but at the end of the day, I went up there, I said what I thought, and let the chips fall where they may.
Right. So the biggest thing, as long as you feel like you were successful in it. I mean, I would never know. My biggest issue has been always with especially as things that got more political. I would say, um, is that we have I call them ride factors. What I mean by ride factors, like there are things that I'm real willing to ride or die for, right? Um, Political opinions have never really been something I could ride or die for, even though
Mm,
over this last year makes a person really feel like they have to. But so there's a few different ride factors, right? Ride for me means that ride or die things, right? So for political opinions, I couldn't feel like I could ride or die for it. Although I could see how, over this last 2 years or whatever, as things have gotten crazy, why people definitely feel the way that they feel. But God is my thing like that. So like if I'm going to have to ride about or die about an opinion, it's gonna be because it's my God opinion. You know what I mean? You understand what I'm saying? Like for my faith, for me, as my thing to where that's one thing that we're not gonna touch. And I grew up, like I said, in Seattle, Washington, and it was a very politically correct place. And I didn't really know that, here we are in 2022, that a lot of the views that I had when I was working for the YWCA, which was all about empowering women and fighting systemic racism, that when I'm arguing with people, at all these workshops and different things like that, I didn't know that my social views would later on become political views. You understand what I mean? So there's a few different things that I can ride or die for. Do you ever get to a point where you feel like it's just not worth it? You know what I'm saying? It's only politics. This is a very small thing. I don't know how religious you are, not religious you are, whatever, what other thing could be taking you um, into much more of a space of saying that this means more important to me than politics right now. But hopefully my question was a question.
yeah. Um, I guess politics is important to me. The culture of the country is important to me. The direction of the culture is
Hmm.
important to me. So, and I feel like if I say it's not worth it to weigh in on something where I think weighing in is useful,
Right.
it's kind of like it leads to a vacuum that just other people step in and push their point of view, right? And it's like
Hmm.
it's a little bit like the argument for why America should, intervene in foreign affairs sometimes. It's like we pull our troops out of there, Russia's going to put their troops in there. China's
Hmm.
going to take over, right? If we stop influencing, it's just someone worse is going to come in.
Right.
So it's not that we want to be doing that. It's
Right.
that someone's going to do it. So it might as well be us. And I think a lot of times when I'm weighing in on political issues, it's, everyone's going to be weighing in. And I know my perspective is it's often not going to be the dominant perspective. And so I feel if I
Right.
don't say something, I'm just letting other people dominate the narrative more. And so I want to do my part.
Right.
But but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to pick your biggest battles, definitely.
Right. Right.
And so not everything is a ride or die issue for me. Not
Right. Right.
everything is an issue that I'm going to stake my whole reputation on. Um,
Right.
yeah.
You have to sort of, yeah, you have to pick your battles. You have to pick your battles. Okay, so my last but not least question, I would say also too on this is sort of sticky. So my understanding is, I asked you a man of faith, but you consider yourself an atheist, right? I've been a Jew, I've been a Muslim, I've been a Christian. I've done my
Mhm.
my fair share of whatever. Were there at any point that you were ever a person of faith or anything like that, or how did it come to be about that you would become an atheist?
No, there was no point at which I believed in a literal God.
Mm-hmm.
I've done meditation retreats. I've done psychedelics. I've felt um I felt what you'd probably call spiritual experiences of
Mm-hmm.
radical connectedness to all people and radical empathy for all beings, and I've had those kind of experiences. I've also had strange experiences while meditating where my entire body felt like it, almost like I had taken some drug, and it
Right.
was it was like tingling and shining head to toe. I've had strange things happen, and I tend to believe that people have um, experienced the strange things they say they experience, whether it's a spiritual experience, a religious experience, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never believed in a literal God that can hear my prayers, or that is running things from heaven. So I never had that belief to begin with, and I never became persuaded with any particular religion. So I've never developed that belief.
Really? So was like
Mhm.
in the house you were raised that way, like your family was that way, or it was like I want to know how.
Neither of my parents believed in God, so
Okay,
they didn't
got it,
raise us to believe. Um,
got it.
and I never went into any particular belief system on my own.
Right. So has there ever been a moment? This is my last question. Has there ever been a moment where you hoped that God exists?
Mm. um,
It's a good question. Thank you. So at least one you have to think about.
so I don't. I think it's hard for me to even really entertain seriously the idea that there is a God up there.
Mm-hmm.
To even hope for it, I'm not sure I can bring myself to hope for it sincerely.
Right.
Um, on the other hand, I think a lot of the attitude in life that would come with a belief in God, I think is positive. Like
Right.
this idea of being radically grateful for everything that you're given, all of your talents, all
Right.
of your um like the idea of really meditating on your blessings in life,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like the healthiest thing an individual can do is to look at everything that's gone well in their life and dwell on
Right.
it, and
Right.
not really take credit for it. Understand that you've been given gifts, right? And
Right.
to walk through life humbly as a result of that, I think is
Right.
the like having that kind of attitude, if when that comes from religion or belief in God, I think is a really beautiful thing. So
Right.
I can't say that I've ever hoped that God is real.
Mm-hmm.
Call me back on my deathbed, I might have a very different attitude. But I've definitely thought that uh, some of the attitudes that can come with a belief in God are deeply healthy.
Deeply healthy. Amazing. Amazing. Okay. Listen, man, I want to tell you, man, I'm definitely a big fan of everything I've been exposed to. Obviously, I'm on God's team, but other than that, I definitely want to tell you, no doubt about it, that just the courage, the amount of courage that it takes to stand up and to fight, even after losing friends and being ridiculed and fighting for something that you believe. I think that we all share that it's something that definitely during these times we don't see a lot. So that's why, people such as yourself, anytime it happens, it's like it's so celebrated, from people who want to have that courage, but they don't necessarily have it. So I want to wish
Yeah.
you, a blessing. You should only go from strength to strength, and you should have only success in every single thing you do. I thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.